It's been a disappointing night for the Conservatives at the ballot box. They've been losing seats in the local elections where results have been coming in all night. There's one result in particular, which we'll come to in a second, but just in a word, yes, give us a one word. How are you summing up, as a Conservative, the last 12 hours?
Challenging.
Challenging, Isabel? as a sort of...
Disaster for the Tories.
Disaster.
Yeah.
OK, Aisha, Labour?
Labour's had a great night and it's...
one word.
Terrific.
Terrific?
Mm-hmm. Terrific.
Such an old-fashioned word.
I'm in an old-fashioned kind of mood.
It was like
Terrific.
without the
She's
E in it.
preparing for the Lords, that's what it is.
OK, there's one result in particular which we know and which we can have a look at. And this is a by-election. This is actual MP being elected here. And we have to go to the north of England, the northwest, and to Blackpool South. So let's just zoom in here and have a look. So Blackpool South is a very interesting constituency. It's been Labour, then Conservative. It's got Blackpool Tower in it. OK, 97, Blair took it. First time in a long time. Gordon Marsden, the MP. And it stayed red until Boris Johnson's landslide in 2019. Get a calculator and work it out. That means it was Labour for 22 years. But they got hit, the Conservatives, by a double whammy. So two things happening. Firstly, the MP Scott Benton got caught in a lobbying scandal. Read the details, it's absolutely ridiculous. So he's gone. But then the second boxing glove that was laid on the Conservatives is just the Prime Minister's problems, the national problems. And it ends up with this result, which is extraordinary. Here's Chris Webb, by the way, his very young son and wife. He wins with nearly 11,000 votes, 60% almost of the share, up 20%. But this is really interesting. Down here, Reform are eating the Conservatives' breakfast here. Look at that. They're only 100 votes behind the Conservatives. And even if you add, the Conservatives could say, well, if you vote Reform, you let in Labour. Actually, put those two together, you get 6,300. Labour would still have won. So it's shattering. And what it means, Calvier, I must put this to you as the Conservative here, what that means is that you're going to lose all your red wall seats. The first sign of an election.
It looks challenging by those figures, Jeremy. I can't deny that. And it's been a tough night in Blackpool South. And I think that, as you said, there's a context here that where the Conservative Party is and what's happened in this particular seat. And all by-elections are like that. They're always a bit unique. And everyone wants to read and extrapolate a national position from them. I've got to say, one thing that hasn't been said about Blackpool South is the turnout. So in 2019, it was almost 60% turnout. 32% last night. So I think we've got to look at that.
Conservatives sitting on their hands.
You know, could well be. This wasn't a national conversation for this by-election. It was a local conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, this is fought in the context of that local conversation.
Just to say on the numbers that it's a 26% swing from the Tories to Labour. That's the third biggest swing in a by-election since 1945. Oh, I'd love to know the other two. One of them was quite recent, I think. I think it might have been...
Oh, what was it? Chesham?
Owen Paterson, wasn't it?
Yeah. Aisha, wasn't there a huge swing in Chesham?
Oh, I want to go Dudley West as well. Let's look them up. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So the third biggest swing since 1945, Aisha.
And what's extraordinary of this, Labour needs a swing of 12.5% to get a majority. And we're now talking about territory of 26% swings.
And in the SNP crater.
Absolutely. And look, also, I mean, to Calvier's point about, look, you know, these by-elections are kind of one-off events. They are, except we've had so many of them, and there is a pattern emerging, which is the Tories are getting humped in every single one. I was just looking at the figures. Labour has won with a swing of more than 20%. This is the sixth by-election where Labour has really knocked it out the park.
You've won, actually, I think, is it 8 or 9 in a row? Just, I mean, every single one.
Every single one. All across the country. Tamworth, Selby, Wellingborough, all across the country.
Yeah.
I think it's also really worth pointing out that Blackpool South is not on Reform's top target list. I mean, very, very far from it. You know, it's not one of the ones that they would expect to be performing really well in. So if they are really nearly coming ahead, or equaling or coming ahead of you in that seat, I think that is incredibly worrying for the Conservative Party and demonstrates that Reform, by the time of the election, will probably be the main opposition to Labour in those seats.
Oh, I see, in the red wall seats.
In the north, yeah, exactly. Obviously,
I'm just, if there's any crumb of comfort for the Conservatives, maybe It's that I don't think the Lib Dems have had a great night, from what I can see so far. And it may be you can hang on against them. You, Culvier, Conservative, can hang on against them in places in Cornwall, for example. Maybe.
Yes, look, that's not the crumb we're looking for. I think, well, you know, if it's the case of we did well better than the Lib Dems and they've done a terrible night, well, that's not quite what we're hoping for. But I think that what the question is that these were local elections. They're not fought on the national debate. And I think when we have the general election, which we all know is coming, that's where it's about what the Conservative vision for the country will be, as well as the track record. It's always hard for any incumbent government. Yes, Aisha, you know, the Conservative lost 5, 6 now by-elections.
Yeah, they won Uxbridge, I think, actually, by the way. So Labour lost...
Yes.
They won, they did win that.
Labour lost Uxbridge. Bizarrely, the Conservatives won a by-election in Hartlepool at the start of the Boris Johnson.
Now, just on that,
I
do want to mention that because that is such an important moment in Labour history, because at that moment, Keir Starmer did a terrible job. In fact, people were saying that he was going to have to resign. He apparently has now revealed he considered quitting at that point.
Over that by-election?
Over that by-election. He and Angela Rayner had a massive dust-up afterwards. The party was feeling really weak. He was even questioning his leadership. Many of us were questioning the future. And at that point, even people like me thought, my gosh, Boris Johnson's going to be in for a decade. So powerful is Boris Johnson. So powerful is the Conservative Party. So useless is the Labour Party. Well, and it shows you just how quickly politics can change. And also, Keir Starmer has done a good job in terms of turning the Labour Party around.
But also maybe that Boris Johnson, who, you know, we all know him so well, don't we, in terms of his strengths and his weaknesses, and you know, that he's an election winner, as Angela Rayner put it, but on the other hand, he seems to have the seeds of his own destruction planted within. And we can see evidence of this yesterday, because he turns up to vote. The system is his own system that he's got, which is ID. He brought in photo ID, and he says they can't let him vote because he's got the wrong ID, or, you know, we've got some pictures of this. Let's have a look. No, we haven't got any pictures. Okay, I thought so. So basically, he couldn't vote at his own polling station.
Extraordinary, Boris Johnson.
But that sums it up, doesn't it?
Extraordinary, Boris Johnson bringing in rules that the rest of us have to abide by, and then he thinks he can break them. I mean, who would have thought it? Who would have thought it?
He didn't break it. He went by the rules.
You're a big fan of him because you worked with him.
I worked with him. We're friends.
He put you in the Lords.
He put me in the Lords, but I worked with him when he was Mayor of London, and we ran this city. We made it the greatest city in the world. You know, it's not quite there now. That was under his mayoralty, and he won a stonking big majority, a 80-seat majority. And he's an election winner, as you said. He's a campaigner.
Well, I was quoting Angela Rayner. Yeah.
Well, he was an election winner, and I think the great tragedy about Boris Johnson, he had it all. He had that huge majority.
Yeah, threw it away.
He had this, and he spaffed it up the wall.
I think, Aisha, you've just said...
he did, that's his own words.
But things in politics...
But
things can change very quickly, as you said, that... People's fortunes in politics change, and this is why when people are trying to project out of one by-election result every time what's going to happen on the national picture,
yeah, true.
Most of the time it isn't an accurate.
Yeah, well, I don't know. What do you think?
Why is nobody talking about the disappearance of the Lib Dem leadership? I don't understand. Is there some big Westminster secret?
Ed Davey got caught in the postmaster scandal.
Where is he? Why is he? I never hear him. I never hear what their positions are on anything. And yet, I mean, I'm in a quite Lib Dem dominated constituency where I live, well, certainly in our local area anyway, they will do pretty well on a local basis because they've still got their ground forces.
So
I think... Oh, well, go on, you analyse it.
So I spent quite a lot of time with Lib Dems last night.
There's got to be a secret.
Well, I think the post office thing is definitely a factor. But also, to be fair to them, with this set of elections, they have done very well at the last 2 years of local elections. And this year, the way it falls thirds and thirds and thirds, they didn't have that many, you know, they had reached their kind of high peak.
Fair enough.
But the other thing that they said to me is that they are kind of keeping their powder dry, and they're just really focusing on those target seats in the south.
And they're good at that.
Yeah, their ground operation is very good. They're really targeting, for example, Jeremy Hunt's seat,
Dominic
Michael
Raab,
Gove's seat,
Sutton
in Surrey.
and Sheen, all of that. Yeah, we know. Well, they may well win in a lot.
If they're successful.
And it helps Labour if actually the Lib Dems do quite well in those blue wall seats.
Yeah. Now, we'd love your thoughts on, given that this looks like being a terrible night for the Conservatives, whether you think that it's game over for Rishi Sunak. First, is it time for Sunak to go? It was a tough night for the Conservatives across the councils. We don't have all the results in yet. The thing that we really want to know is the mayoral votes. We don't have those. London's a big one. A couple of others as well where Conservatives are vulnerable. But people in England and Wales voted to elect councillors in 107 local authorities. Now, I'm going to thank here the BBC website. This is our graphics. Look at this, guys. This is we're up to the second here. So this is updating continuously. So first of all, I'll give you a map here, okay, of the terrain. And there's certain councils that we might just point out. So you can see London and South East there. Now, this here, Rushmore, is in Hampshire. It's a council that Labour really haven't had for many, 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 many years, if at all. And what's significant is it's in a very, very conservative area. It includes Aldershot. They wouldn't expect normally to be taking that. So Rushmore was the very first thing they started celebrating. And over here, then, we'll just take a look. That bit of red is Thurrock. Again, Thurrock was a Labour seat for a long time under Blair. Then it went Conservative. Now that council has gone to Labour. So that's all a bit of a bellwether there. And if we go further north into the middle of the country, you've got Redditch as well, which Labour have taken. That's good for Labour. The Conservatives have managed to hang on to Harlow, though. They won by 1 seat, key general election battleground where all 33 seats were up for grabs. So let me just show you what else is on it, because there's an awful lot, OK? There's a lot of stuff going on. So we have the council results here so far. And actually, we're getting quite a nice long way into the process. So you can see here, Labour have a total of 18 councils which are contested. They've added 3. Lib Dems, 4, all steady. Conservatives, 3 councils defending. They've lost 3. And then various others, always worth pointing out no overall control, because there are 10 councils here where no overall control. The next thing to say, all right, because there's quite a lot going on, is mayors. And this is what Culvier knows all about, because he used to work for Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. It's a very, very big one, that. So Labour's Andy Burnham is all 100% certain to win again in Greater Manchester. But have a look down the list. Sadiq Khan, defending in London, a very, very hot contest there. Susan Hall for the Conservatives against him. He'll be, I suspect, relieved if he wins. Tees Valley, Ben Houchen. Labour saying they've given up on winning that. I'm not sure about that. I think they might, but we'll see. Not got any results from that yet. The one that looks very vulnerable is Andy Street, the Conservative mayor in the West Midlands. What benefits Andy Street quite substantially is that he seems to be running not as a Conservative, so far as it's not anywhere near any of his campaign material, the name of his own party. And then one more for you, police and crime commissioners. A lot of people think that these are absolutely pointless jobs, but anyway, they give us a good bellwether. Labour's Claire Moody replaces a Conservative in Avon. We're looking for change here. Most of them are Conservatives, OK? Most of them, Conservatives will probably win again. Durham, Labour, most of them Conservatives. Let's just see what we've got. See very few results. But Lincolnshire, the Conservatives have retaken Mark Jones. And we'll just have a look here. Who else have we got results from? I'm sure we've got another result here. Hang on. There's another Labour one here. Let's see. What have we got? We've got another Labour. We've got another one. Police and Crime Commissioner result. OK, we'll find it. So, Labour, here we are, Cumbria. David Allen takes it. So, anyway, there we go. We're not quite there yet, but it is a bad night for the Conservatives. And then we get to our debate, which is whether Rishi Sunak needs to say, look, he's, as Tim Montgomery said this morning, the editor of Conservative Home, he's a nice bloke, but he's no good at politics.
Look, I think the country just wants a general election. The country is in a really, really bad state. There are so many things that are not working. You know, everybody's got their own thing that affects them most, that annoys them most about the current state of affairs, whether it's the unbelievable waiting times in the NHS, which I actually am optimistic that Labour might improve, whether it's the state of crime on our streets, you know, knife crime in particular is really alarming, whether it's the fact the trains aren't running properly,
that's Labour. Labour mayor in London, come on.
We could go on and on. I think people just want to get rid of this government.
Well, yeah, it feels...
So please, let's not string out the agony for this country. OK,
it does feel like 97, with the one proviso that Starmer is not Blair.
And the economy is in a very, very bad situation as well, because Blair did inherit a good economic settlement. Look, Isabel and I have very different politics. We disagree on pretty much everything, but on this we are in agreement. this country is utterly broken. And that is the lived experience of people. Unless you are the super rich, everyday life in modern Britain feels like an endurance test. Whether you're trying to get your kid into a good school, you're trying to get care for your elderly parents,
a GP appointment,
just trying to get on a train, it's a gamble. It's an absolute...
I hope you're writing all this down, Carver. It's making notes now.
And I do think that one of the things that has always been very important for the Conservatives, and as a Labour person, the Labour Party, the stereotypes about politics are Labour is kind of quite cuddly and nice and wants to be nice to people, but the Tories were always really efficient and they were really organised and they would like deliver things and they were really good on the economy. That has all been blown out the water.
Partly blown by COVID, though. You've got to be fair here.
You cannot use COVID as an excuse.
Really, Carver? Do you think COVID can give you a bit of cover?
Well, we need a bit of reality here. You know, Labour cuddly and nice, Aisha. I think
well, they did on things like NHS. Look at the satisfaction levels of the NHS.
You said your bit, but Labour generally are seen as the people who spend their way into a problem and then leave the mess to be then dealt with by the Conservatives. That's the traditional view, and that's generally what's happened. The economy, you say, is not working. Well, actually, the economy is probably in a better state than most, as is described by the IMF and the ODC, is in a better place than most G7 nations, considering, yes, COVID, but considering, yes, the Ukraine war, considering, yes, the energy crisis, global issues that have hit all countries, and yet we are still doing better than most countries in dealing with that. We've brought inflation down from an 11.2% high to now 3%. The economy is in a decent space. There are problems, but you've got to look at the other side of things as well.
Inflation was Rishi Sunak has not done anything to bring inflation. That is the market, and you've got to be really clear about that.
Okay, let's get another guest in. Interesting night for reform. They nearly came second in Blackpool South, within 100 or so votes. Although Labour won in Sunderland, Reform claimed more votes there than the Conservatives in 16 of Sunderland's 25 seats. So let's speak to Richard Tice, Reform UK leader. Hello. I guess I should say congratulations, should I?
Thank you, Jeremy. A very good morning to you. Yes, I've just got back from Blackpool South, where we got our best ever by-election result by some margin. And we outdid all the doomsayers who said we could never get our national polling average in an election. Well, we did, and we came within a whisker of beating the Tories in that by-election. So we're delighted with that fantastic local candidate. And as you just rightly said, in Labour heartlands in the North East, again, we're smashing the Tories. And essentially what's happening, slowly but surely, is we are now in the north of England and indeed in the Midlands, and I think that some of the mayoral elections may show this as they're counted over the next couple of days. We're becoming the real opposition to Labour as the Tories, frankly, sink below the waves.
So I think you and Isabel are partners, right? So we should have fair.
I'm not going to interview him.
We should. No. I just.
This is basically the most I see of the guy.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, for full disclosure, we should just say that. So you're welcome to greet each other down the tube if you want. But
good morning.
Well, it is a good morning for you. There's no doubt about it. But although, as everybody says, the better you do, the better Labour do. And in the end, if you vote for reform, we know what happens. Labour win power.
Well, the reality is there's no difference between the two main parties. They're variants of socialism. High taxes, high regulation, high wasteful government spending, mass immigration, pro-net zero. The result is we've got zero economic growth. In fact, we've got the longest recession per person, and that's what really matters, for 70 years since records began. It's 2 years long. And I mean, the economy is in a terrible, terrible state. We've got the highest debt levels. We've got the lowest growth decade for 70 years. I mean, the whole thing is a catastrophe. And there's nothing in Labour's plans that are going to change course. I mean, the reality is that Britain needs reform. The economy needs reform. Our healthcare needs reform. Our immigration system needs reform. Law and order is a catastrophe, and it's just dangerous on the streets in many towns and cities. So that needs reform. Everywhere, bluntly, needs reform. And that's what we offer. It's a different agenda. And I think the country's ready for it.
I don't mean to lower the tone, but is it the case that the reason Nigel Farage hasn't come on board in a public way yet is because he wants to continue earning money from broadcasting?
You're not lowering the tone, Jeremy. You're raising the tone. Look, Nigel's a very successful broadcaster with an alternative channel, and he enjoys that. But obviously, he's got a big decision. Does he want to get back into frontline politics when he thought he'd sort of left that behind? Does he want to stand? How long does he want to do it? Those are decisions for him. I've always said, look, the more help, the better. The country's in a terrible state. We've got a clear view as to what needs to be done to rescue and save Britain. And if Nigel's able to get stuck in, fantastic.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard Tice. So good night for reform. You wouldn't disagree with that, Aisha?
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, again, I very much disagree with a lot of the ideas that Reform put forward, but it doesn't really matter because Reform, unless Nigel Farage stands, possibly Lee Anderson, it's highly unlikely that Reform will actually win a seat, but they're very important to the next general election because they will help Labour do better because, as Richard said, they are really coming hard after that Tory vote.
And actually, just thinking about it, Kelvia, from the point of view of your party, which is a difficult thought to have, but you guys appear to be bleeding out at the moment. And I'm wondering if the longer you leave it before an election, the more Reform get their act together, and you don't want that.
No, I don't think so. Look, firstly about Reform, yes, they've had a reasonable night tonight, but they're still not achieving what, say, UKIP were achieving between 2010 and 2015.
Hang on, we're way ahead in terms of the
not
poll
consistently
ratings.
across that period.
No.
And then UKIP vote never really materialised at a general election.
Absolutely years to get where they did in poll ratings. I mean, Reform is basically a start-up. It's only
You say we're way ahead, are you?
Yeah, OK, we can correct that. For the record, I am not a member of the Reform Party. I'm quite willing to criticise Mr Tice when he deserves it.
Right.
He hasn't unstacked the dishwasher and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that, not me.
Chance would be a fine thing. So let me rephrase that. They are considerable. They've made massive progress compared to the time it took to UKIP to build. And if Nigel comes back, I think that we will probably see, all of us political observers, a significant uplift again in the polls. And I think that it is entirely possible that Reform will pretty quickly reach level pegging with the Conservatives. And if Sunak leaves it too long, will overtake the Conservatives.
I know we've all got stuff to say, but I need to take a break and we'll come back to this, I promise. So your calls on whether you think Sunak should go, and there are maybe arguments that would help. He could be helped by having an election rapidly, but it's looking bad for the Conservatives. David and Paul are lined up on the lines to give us their opinion. Your results are coming into the local election. They haven't got them all yet, but it's already looking very bad for Rishi Sunak. Oh my goodness, the result in Blackpool South is horrible. Not too far away, David in Cumbria, hello.
Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm well. How do you analyse this sort of great thicket of results we're getting?
Right. Basically, if you get rid of a Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority, then don't have a general election, then freeze the tax thresholds and don't invest on infrastructure, it's hardly surprising what's going on.
Yeah, I do. So we're seeing pictures of Rishi Sunak here, and I think we maybe forget the fact that a lot of people are still very attached to Boris Johnson, and they don't appreciate that Sunak wielded the dagger. And they always say he who wields the dagger never wears the crown, but he ended up with the crown as well, and it's not going well.
Yeah, because if you have a coup, because that's what happened in 2022, whatever you think of Boris Johnson, or I think there has to be, in a democracy, the only people that should be allowed to get rid of a prime minister, apart from ill health or death, is the people.
Yeah, well, that's a very strong current of opinion, Aisha, isn't it, among Conservative grassroots?
Yeah, I think there is something in that. And of course, full disclosure, when Tony Blair handed over to Gordon Brown, there wasn't a general election. But I think we've seen such a revolving door of leaders at Downing Street.
Imagine how many general elections we would have had if we...
But, I mean,
May had one. I suppose Trust didn't... Yeah, OK. Trust
but also you've seen it in
didn't.
Scotland as well. We've seen the same thing in Scotland recently as well. And I just think that level of political instability is just not good for the country. And also, it's not good for somebody who doesn't have a mandate. Remember, Rishi Sunak was not even voted for by his own party. Liz Truss beat him in that leadership contest. So he's really got no mandate from his party. It was his MPs who gave him that coronation. And he's losing. Every time he has contact with the public, he's losing at the ballot box. It doesn't look good.
Thank you, David, for your analysis. Paul in Warwickshire, what do you think of what we're seeing?
Well, I think that Rishi Sunak has had a very difficult time taking over effectively after the COVID episode and all the costs involved then, and he's been unable to bring in any tax cuts that should have been brought in, and the time that he's had has been has been very short to solve some of the problems we've got. He really hasn't had a chance, and I do not think the criticism of the health service are correct. I've had a number of appointments with the health service in Warwick and Rugby, and I've found the whole thing to be very satisfactory. Good. I've not had to wait a long time for appointments.
Good.
And I've been dealt with very expeditiously.
Well, that's really good to hear, Paul. I hope you're getting better. Thank you so much. Angela in Derby, hi.
Hi.
What do you think? What would you do if you were the Conservatives? Get rid of Sunak? They've still got time.
I think it'll be very difficult, because I think each time you have a vote in no confidence in your leader, I do believe then it should be a vote in no confidence in the party itself. However, I do think he needs to be gone. I would suggest maybe David Cameron. I know it's very controversial, but I do believe he stood by his word, didn't he? When we lost the election, well, when the country lost the election with Brexit, he stood by his words.
That's an interesting way of putting it, yeah.
Yeah, but also I think
country lost the Brexit election. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I think because
so you think send for Cameron, you get the old guard back in. That's a good shout, because Penny Mordaunt seems to be on manoeuvres, but maybe Cameron would be the answer. Calvier, what about that? Just men in grey suits come to Cameron and say, we need you now.
Labour would love that, wouldn't they? Cameron wheeled out.
But how can you do PMQs from the House of Lords?
Well, they get him a seat.
No, I think, look, this is all hypothetical nonsense, really. Rishi Sunak is Prime Minister. He's going to lead the Conservative Party into the next general election.
Why not?
The question is when that next general election happens. He said it will happen later in this year. And he's going to build up to that. And he's going to make his case to the country about why he should be the Conservative Party. And we're talking about leadership changes, Aisha, both in the SNP and Labour Party and the Conservative Party. In this country, in the UK, we vote for parties. We don't really do a presidential type election. And that's why these parties... I know we've moved towards more personality politics.
We have to just go to our break, but we've got more to come on this. Thank you, Angela, for your call. Thank you, panel. Keep here, stay here. More calls now on whether it's time for Rishi Sunak to go. That's after a bad night for the Conservatives at the local elections. We haven't got the full extent of it yet. We're waiting on those mayoral results. We've got all kinds of councillors still counting, etc., but it looks bad. And South Blackpool is awful for the Conservatives. Michael in Kent, hello.
Hello.
You a Conservative, Michael?
I've always voted Conservative throughout my life. I've now retired, and I'm in a situation where I don't think I can vote for anyone.
What about reform?
Yeah, the trouble is so many of the parties, they're all arguing over the same topics and subjects, and I really do think that there's a lack of imagination, and I'd like to see the Conservatives get in, but they've got to listen and expand their ideas of what they're going to do. Rishi had a wonderful opportunity during COVID when he did the business rate holiday to have cancelled the business rates and council tax and then introduced purchase tax to run alongside VAT. Yeah. And that would have raised the money more evenly and distributed across the country and helped with the levelling up that the Conservatives keep rabbiting on about.
The massive tax cuts are fine, but Liz Truss did that thing, didn't she? And look what happened. They just flushed the whole government.
Yes, but it wasn't terribly well thought through, was it? And
so would you want to see Rishi Sunak gone, Michael, or not?
No, I don't, because you've had Boris Johnson, who went off half-baked with his Brexit. He didn't complete the job. You had
Truss.
Theresa May was submissive to the EU. David Cameron, someone said earlier that she'd like to see him come back, but he wanted to remain in the EU, and he's going to try and undo the Brexit. And I think we're in a strong position to actually lead forward with a bit of imagination and determination and firmness that the EU could be led in a better direction themselves.
OK, thank you, Michael, very much. Interesting. It all comes back to Brexit. Stephen in Tamworth, hi.
Hi.
What do you think is the future for Rishi Sunak, the immediate future?
I think Rishi Sunak is doing a fantastic job on the quiet. He's not bouncing about on zip wires or knocking little kids over on the rugby field. He's just quietly getting on with the job.
Well, quietly is the right word, yeah.
People who knock him, quietly, yeah. People who knock him for having £90 trainers or whatever. I know people on benefits that spend more than that on trainers.
Well, also he's richer than the king, so he can afford shoes.
So what is richer than the king?
Yeah.
That just smells of jealousy.
Well, I'm a bit jealous, to be honest, of that, yeah. But I mean,
on your salary, Jeremy? On your salary?
Well,
you're jealous?
Come on, Stephen.
We're all jealous.
Yeah, we're all jealous. Listen,
jealous.
The thing is, Stephen, the rich thing...
£1,200 a month, and I'm perfectly happy with that.
Right, but the rich thing is about him being out of touch, isn't it? That's the point. You may...
Jeremy,
go on.
That's his partner's money. He grew up working with a family business, a pharmacist. He studied hard, he worked hard. He's a success story of Britain. This is not about rich.
He did make a lot of money in investment banking.
Yeah,
but that's a distraction.
I'm going to support that argument.
No, listen, I'm not complaining about it.
He grafted. He really did. He's a bright guy, and he was always an absolute swot. This was a kid that was head boy of his junior school and then head boy of his senior school.
Fine, but if you build a swimming pool during a recession, people are going to make comments.
Any of that.
And
we're an aspirational society and an aspirational country.
In fact, this is about so much is wrong with our country. Is this whole they're too rich? That's not where we should be. We want everybody to have the opportunity to get better off.
But inequality is an issue in this
absolutely.
country.
We've got rising inequality. And look, I've got no problem with Rishi Sunak being rich. Let's not kid ourselves, though. A lot of that was not just through hard graft. It was the luck of investment banking, which is a bit of a gamble. We know that. And he married very well, as my mother keeps telling me. He married exceptionally well. Mum, if you're watching, apologies, I've not married well or married at all. But the point is, you don't mind people being rich if they have got empathy for other people. The fact that because he's kind of failing as a Prime Minister, he's now going after people on benefits and people who are sick, that doesn't sit well with people.
Aisha, what we just heard from both Michael and Stephen is that they're admiring the work he's doing. They're looking at him quietly going ahead, improving the economy, they want him to be more pro-business, cut taxes, do those conservative things, and they're willing to give him that chance because they can see.
And there may be Conservative voters who didn't vote in the last 24 hours who are waiting for the general election. I don't know. William in London, hi.
Hi there, Jeremy. How are you? You all right?
Yeah, fine. Do you want Rishi Sunak to go?
Personally, full disclosure, I'm a Labour supporter, but I do think it would be detrimental to the Conservatives if they were to try and elect yet another leader. I don't think that that's going to fly with the public, to be honest with you.
It's a bit like football. I don't know if you follow football, but I notice when a team gets a new manager, so when a team gets a new manager, they normally win the next two games because you get a bit of bounce.
Yeah, but you don't do it. You don't do it with a couple of games left of the season, which is basically what we are.
Very good.
Brilliant.
Very good.
The other thing is, though, I was going to say two quick points. I'm coming at this from a different angle. A lot of people are saying that Labour's victory in the next general election is nailed on. I don't believe that, and I really hope it isn't the case, because I'm not an admirer of Keir Starmer, to say the very least. I think he's an absolute charlatan. But, and I know that Aisha Ayazarika won't like me for saying that, but I think a lot of people feel that way. The local elections yesterday weren't reflective of what could happen in a general election, because I think many Muslims are going to feel very, very aggrieved, and do feel very, very aggrieved.
Well, you make a good point, and there are some results reflecting that.
They will just generally not vote for Labour at all. It'll be a case for them of none of the above. They're not going to vote for the Conservatives. And one more quick
Go on quickly,
point.
William.
Aisha Ayazarika kind of let the cat out of the bag a few minutes ago when she said how detrimental to the Conservative vote Reform UK standing in those competitive seats will be. And yet she makes no mention, conveniently, because she doesn't like Jeremy Corbyn, of the fact that UKIP stood down many candidates in seats in order to give the Conservatives a free ride in the 2019 general election.
All right.
And that never gets mentioned.
That wasn't
and
UKIP,
it's
that was
always the
Reform.
case
All right, William. Okay, thank you.
Party.
That was the what party? The Brexit Party. Yeah, I got so confused about UKIP Reform. What's the Lawrence Fox one? There's another one.
That's nothing.
Reclaim. I know you have to keep saying it's nothing to do with me.
I thought the point William was going to make was about the Workers' Party, which will have an impact on Labour, on the Labour vote, because that's where they will be looking at potentially taking that vote that is seen as
This is the George Galloway Party.
Yeah,
That's
so
right,
on
yeah.
that, I think the Gaza conflict is going to hurt the Labour vote. We saw that in Oldham. But if you look at how votes are distributed in this country if we had proportional representation, it would make a big difference.
Do you think we should have?
But that's a separate question. But let me finish my point first. Because of where a lot of Labour votes are piled up, I mean, I'm very upset about the Gaza situation, and I am worried that the Muslim vote will turn away, not just the Muslim vote, but the progressive vote. But if you look at how the vote shares are, how this election is going to be won is more those red wall seats than the big urban gatherings like London or Birmingham and those kinds.
And we'll have more data about this so-called Muslim vote as a result of these council elections once that's all been passed. Helen in Dorset, hi.
Hello.
Well, what do you think? It's a big old day.
I think Rishi Sunak should go, and I think the Conservatives, if they want to win the next election, should bring Boris back.
OK, all right. Get him back from his after-dinner speeches.
Get him back for everything. He's the only one, the Conservative Party, who's got the charisma to get it through.
Well, yeah, I don't know. If you were him, would you fancy it? Because you'd have to, I mean, if they're going to lose with him, he would probably be cheesed off about that. Thank you, Helen. There is a big, there's a big pro-Boris faction. Christine in Staffordshire, hi.
Hi.
Do you agree with that?
Good morning. I think it's time for Rishi to go, yes, but not to be replaced by another leader that has not been elected by the people of the country. The people in the country have had enough now. They want an opportunity for an election and make a decision as to the way this country is going to go in the future. Is it more privatisation, loss of the NHS, or do we want to actually get back to something semblance of order? Water companies that actually do what they're supposed to do, railways run on time, you can get an appointment with a GP, be seen at a hospital. How many things do we need to actually list as the problems that need fixing? It's been
you've been in power for a long time, since 2010. So there's a lot, but my goodness, we haven't even mentioned the fact that we're so polluted, the rivers and the sea. We had a complaint from France the other day.
Well, I think the French are also looking at their rivers, because I hear they're going to have to look at what Olympic sports might be done on the same because of the pollution there. So this is not just there are problems everywhere. And I don't think the water issue is directly a political issue.
Is it not a Tory issue?
No, it's been something it's a government thing that they now need to look at what's happening in terms of regulation, what the water companies are doing, the investment that's been made, and we can go in. And I think there does need to be an examination on how debt has been in the water industry and how it's
pulling
been managed.
Focus. Get off that. And just there's a number of viewers saying Boris is the only one who can pull this off. Do you agree with that?
What I know the public are saying, and people who like him or don't like him, is that Boris is a fantastic campaigner. And he gets out there and he gets a message across. And I think that's what the Conservative Party need. They need a clearer message. And I think we're hearing that from the voters. What is it that the Conservative Party will offer in government going forward? That's what the Prime Minister will talk about as he sets up to fight the next general election.
Well, let's see what he does in the next few hours, because we want to see and hear from Rishi Sunak. Thank you for your calls. Calvia, thank you for joining us as well. We're going to let you go now. Stay with us.